Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to today's installment of the Deep-3 here on Wednesday, December 18th. Before we get into today's plays of the day, just a quick announcement. Scott is not available because he has the flu, so he will be back tomorrow, but in his absence, he asked me to take his place. So, without further ado, we're going to dive into today's three plays of the day. A lot to go through. Decent amount of games in the NBA, a lot of games in college, and all three of the plays today will be on college basketball. These plays are in no particular order, but at the same point, these are definitely three plays that I looked through, and I definitely saw value with. So the first play we're going to be talking about is going to be between North Carolina and Gonzaga, and that line is currently available at minus 12.5 for Gonzaga, and we like the home team here with Gonzaga. North Carolina, if you ignore the fact that, the name of the program is North Carolina, this team really isn't that good. And especially with Cole Anthony out, this team is going to struggle. You remember that one year when Kentucky ended up struggling so badly that they ended up making the NIT and they lost to Robert Morris in the first round? I think North Carolina is that bad. I think North Carolina, even before the Anthony injury, was underachieving. And now, with Anthony out, this team just can't score. North Carolina has been known throughout the Roy Williams era to be an up-tempo, high-profile offense, and at this point, they're only averaging 68.4 points per game, and they're only shooting 39.8% from the floor. This team just isn't good. This team just lost on the road against Virginia. Then after that, they lost at home against Wofford. They've lost three straight, mostly by embarrassing fashion, and now they have to travel to Gonzaga to face the number 2 team in the country. I think this game's going to get really ugly. Gonzaga, if you've looked at their numbers, is shooting 10% better from the floor. They're averaging 17 more points per game. Both defenses are relatively similar, but I just think Gonzaga is going to be able to generate more offensive chances, and I think that they should be able to win this game relatively easily. This game could turn into a blowout. Gonzaga's been fantastic so far this season, and they also just beat Washington and Arizona in back-to-back games on the road. So they've looked really good, and now they get to return to the comforts of home against a reeling North Carolina team that's 6-4 on the season, that pretty much has, I don't want to say they've accepted the fact that their season has completely fallen apart, but I think everybody can realize that this team has completely fallen apart based on the fact that they were originally in the top 15 when the season started, and now they're currently unranked. This team just has no answers for anybody, and I don't think a trip to Gonzaga is suddenly going to fix that. Gonzaga opened up at minus 10. They're currently up to 12.5, and that's the line I will be taking. So the first play on the Deep-3 will be Gonzaga minus 12.5 here, and that line is available on FanDuel. So other than that, though, the second play they're going to be talking about is going to be in a college basketball matchup between Houston Baptist and Stephen F. Austin. And for this game, Stephen F. Austin is actually minus 13.5 at home, and we like the Lumberjacks here, minus the 13.5. I know this line seems pretty high, and I know that money has come in on Houston Baptist, but at the same point, I don't see how I can back Baptist here, and I have to go with Stephen F. Austin. Houston Baptist is 0-8 on the season. This will be the first conference matchup for both teams this season, but Houston Baptist is allowing 101.1 points per game. That's not a typo. They're giving up over 100 points per game, and Stephen F. Austin's averaging 82 points per game, and they're only giving up 67.6. If you look at all the stats, Stephen F. Austin's better in pretty much every single metric. They're averaging 6 more points per game. They're giving up roughly 34 less points per game. They're shooting 7% better from the floor. They're averaging over 2 more rebounds per game. They're averaging roughly 1.5 more assists per game. They're averaging 0.8 more blocks per game, and they're averaging 6.1 more steals per game. I don't see how Houston Baptist is going to cover this number. Stephen F. Austin has shown that they're a pretty solid team after they were able to go into Cameron Indoor and beat Duke. And I think that in this game in itself, I know that money is probably coming on Baptist because of the fact that this is a conference matchup. I don't think it matters. Houston Baptist can't stop anybody. They have one of the worst defenses in the entire country. I think Stephen F. Austin should be able to score at least 90 in this game, and I don't think Houston Baptist will be able to keep this game relatively close. I think Austin will blow this game open. I think they'll win this game by 20 plus. And until Baptist shows me they can actually stop somebody, I think that this team will be a fade moving forward. The total in this game is also really high, as this total is currently at 172, so they expect a ton of points in this game. I do think, though, that Stephen F. Austin, with their ability to force turnovers due to their 11.9 steals per game, should be able to get enough stops to create enough fast break opportunities to score at will against Houston Baptist. Stephen F. Austin could score 100 in this game. I think they'll probably end up somewhere in the realm of 90, and I just don't think that Houston Baptist will be able to score enough points to keep this game within the number. So the second play on the Deep 3 will be Stephen F. Austin minus 13.5, and that is also available on FanDuel. Now the third play of the Deep 3 here is going to be on another college basketball matchup, and this one will be between the Utah State Aggies and the South Florida Bulls. Now interestingly for this game, if you think that South Florida is the home team based on how these teams are, located on the various sports books, that is not the case. This game is actually being played on a neutral in the Houston Rockets Stadium at the Toyota Center here, and we actually like Utah State here on this neutral court, and that number is available at minus 8.5. If you looked at both of the teams so far this season, South Florida is 6-4, Utah State is 10-2, but Utah State's been the much better team in almost every aspect as well. They're averaging 16 more points per game. They're giving up 1 more point per game, so South Florida's defense is slightly better, but Utah State's shooting better from the floor. They're averaging over 10 more rebounds per game, and I think that Utah State should be able to create a ton of second chance points due to their ability to crash the glass, and I think South Florida will give up a ton of second chance points as a result. If you look at Utah State, they're also averaging 5 more assists, and they're averaging more blocks. South Florida has played well lately as they have won each of their last 3 games. But if you've looked at South Florida's schedule, they have played absolutely nobody this season. Their toughest opponent up to this point is arguably Boston College. That's pretty much it. And they lost by 14 in that game. They played Pine Bluff, Boston College, IUPUI, Wofford, Loyola Chicago, New Mexico State, Nebraska, Furman, Dartmouth, and Drexel. That's definitely a very weak schedule. And now Utah State, who was originally in the preseason top 25, they have to face on a neutral. Utah State already has a ton of experience playing on a neutral court as they played in one of those tournaments earlier this season in just a different country. So I think they should be able to perform pretty well in this spot. Utah State's off of a loss to BYU. BYU's been pretty good this season. They've also lost on the road to St. Mary's. So they've had a pretty tough schedule, but at the same point, I just think Utah State is the much better team. And this being on a neutral, I just think that Utah State should be able to get enough attempts at the foul line. I think they should be able to create enough second chances points with their rebounds. And one thing to mention, South Florida is also a really bad free throw shooting team. South Florida as a team is shooting 59% from the free throw line. So even if they end up in the bonus early on, this team won't capitalize on any of the opportunities they get from the charity stripe. And I think Utah State should be able to do a pretty solid job at extending their lead from the foul line. Because as I mentioned just a second ago, South Florida is shooting 59% from the foul line. If you compare that to Utah State, it's not even close. Utah State from the foul line is actually shooting 77.5%. So if there is relatively even free throws in terms of the amounts, or if Utah State ends up going to the line more, this game could turn ugly. South Florida could end up missing half their free throws, and Utah State could make about 80%. So based on that, I think Utah State should be able to cover this number. So the 3 plays on the Deep 3 will be Gonzaga minus 12.5, SF Austin, which is available at minus 13.5, and Utah State, which is available at minus 8.5. Other than that, though, that's going to over this installment of the Deep 3 here on Wednesday, December 18th. Good luck to all of you and your respective bets today. Bye, everyone.